All right, welcome back. How you doing, Melissa? How you doing, Michael?
Great, Al. Good to
Great,
be
thanks,
here.
Al.
Hey, thanks for being here, and super excited about this topic because continuous listening is something that we've long talked about, and it's been more popular with COVID, and how organizational leaders are you're trying to understand what the employee experience is all about, and in turn, what is the most appropriate response. So, for those who don't know you two, Melissa, you want to start, provide a brief introduction and what you're going to be sharing today?
Sure. My name is Melissa Arronte. I've been at Medallia for almost 2 years now. I can't believe it. But I was previously a customer of Medallia, where I implemented customer and employee experience programs. And digital is one of my absolute favorite products. And Michael Mallett is one of my absolute favorite medallions. And I'm so excited to share this with you and share him with you today.
So, Michael, tell us what you do there. Digital is a pretty cool title, so run with it.
It's great, Al, and thank you so much for the warm intros from both of you. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Mallett. I am our practice lead of digital here at Medallia. I have been here at 7 years, so that is a really long time, and I'm an old-timer here. And my career, I've been 10 plus years in the space in research and customer experience. And the reason why I'm here to talk with you all today is the product we represent, digital channels, technologies like we're using right now. We all know employees depend on this day and age. So I'm just really excited to talk about how technology and employees can really come together to understand more about how employees feel.
Hey, I'm excited to learn from both of you. So I'm going to get out of the way, step back, let you do your thing, and I'll come back in a bit and we'll talk about it. Sound good?
So, Michael, if you don't mind, if I start with a couple sentence story about how we got together on this.
Sure.
So, as I mentioned, I've been a customer of Medallia, implementing customer and employee experience. And one of the tools that we use substantially for customer experience is a digital survey. So as soon as I came to Medallia, I immediately sought out Michael and said, we've got to get together and create a digital employee experience tool. And Michael took it and ran with it, and now we have it, and it's amazing. And so I'm excited for him to share it with you today.
And Melissa, we just had the coming to truth moment, realizing, wait a second, we help our brands and customers engage with their own customers. Why don't we take what we have and do the same for their employees? It sounds easy, but we know that there's challenges to navigate in organizations and standing that up. So we're really excited to share, how to navigate that, why it's important, and what actually digital means, which may not be something that's always clear to all of us. And so that excited, I know, both of us, Melissa.
Yes, for sure. So I'd love for you to go ahead and advance the slide. If it's okay, I'm just going to talk for a moment about how we think about employee experience, and then Michael will talk about how digital fits in and what that means. So some of you may have heard me talk before that when we think about employee experience at Medallia, we're really thinking about employees coming to work every day because they want to make a difference in the lives of their customers. That may be through creating a new accounting process, it may be through developing software, or it might be serving customers directly. But they all come to work because they want to have an impact. And so we're really looking to understand where are these points that there's an obstacle to employees having an impact. We're looking to uncover these obstacles and better enable employees to perform, to deliver, to delight customers, or to develop an accounting process, or to program software. And that's really where digital comes into play and makes it really engaging and easy for employees to provide feedback. So if you want to talk with the problem, Michael, please go ahead.
I'm happy to, Melissa. And I think we all realize hopefully we're all fortunate, as I know Melissa and I are, to work at a company that deeply cares about us. And we all try our very best. But if we think about what has been happening for employees, even in the last year, and I'm sure it's always been happening at some extent, it is hard to be satisfied with what you have. We all experience new pressures on how to support new ways that customers engage with the organization. We all feel like we want to do better ourselves. We want to enable ourselves on new technologies, new processes. We want to keep up with what the company is doing, and we want to be our best selves, right? And we have technologies to do some of that, but maybe there's a need for improvements. Maybe there's a need for new technologies. Maybe some things are there, but it's not as easy as we would like around finding and managing benefits or seeing updates from the organization. And at the end of the day, again, we all try our best, especially our companies, but is it really easy to talk about how you feel about that experience, however it's going, right then and there when you're having it? And so we're finding when we talk about this and share what we think is the potential, and you can see the data here, employees still say we could do more to create that dialogue between them and the company. Melissa, are you hearing sorts of the same things out there?
We definitely are. Especially we're hearing companies talk about the idea of digital transformation and how do they accelerate that. And being able to bring in employee ideas and feedback as we're rolling out digital changes and system changes has been so powerful because employees can see the issues for themselves and customers right away, provide that feedback, and allow these agile teams to make changes in real time.
So I'm curious, Melissa, as we go through and I think talk about how programs are today, do you feel like there's different types of people involved in even looking for this information or trying to improve this process or work with the technology than there ever have been before?
I think there's so many different people involved in looking to improve the employee experience. But what we often see is what we call the company view that you're showing here. And that's the annual engagement survey, quarterly pulses, and the typical life cycle journey moments. And these are important sources of information for us and are great for reporting to the board, right? Making decisions at the enterprise level. But when we speak about digital, we're really getting to another level. And as what you're alluding to, Michael, is this isn't necessarily for the board and the C-suite. It's for the frontline manager every day. It's for the IT department. It's for facilities, for real estate, for procurement, for all these different organizations in the company that support employees day in and day out.
And I think that as we'll go through and we'll share examples of live clients and scenarios that you and I have heard, sharing from my perspective, being new to the employee experience practice side of the house, I have been, both shocked and happily amazed that we've had more conversations in the last, I'd say even 6 months, let alone 12 months, around the typical kinds of personas out there from CHRO organizations, from the analyst side, even saying, if we could get more insights from additional perspectives, that can actually add on to the program that already exists. And again, the great work that everyone is working on very hard out there. So it's not to say that the company view isn't quite important, right? But there's always room to see new perspectives, the employee perspective. And I know we wanted to get into that together.
Exactly. So if we go to the next. Right.
So when we're here, Melissa, and something that I wanted to see if you feel the same way, again, outside looking in, but when we think about employee experience and how it can give you that richness, that depth, and you can present to the board and you can really, trend year over year and benchmark. When we think about just that and how much more there could be, well, then we think about where there's opportunity for improvements. For example, missing when, for example, if I were to use a technology like Workday, and there were maybe some questions that were in there for me to answer and I didn't know about that, or there's a way for me to manage my time off. And maybe this process isn't that easy for me based on our policies or just the functionality I see in front of me. That's something that I might feel, but I typically don't have anywhere to go with that information other than sending someone an email, which, it's a very formal thing and I don't really want to do that, or creating a ticket, which maybe nothing is quite broken, but I just don't love how this makes me feel. It's not as easy, or I can't do what I want to do. And I just wanted to share it as, I think this could be slightly better. And so that is one of the room for opportunities we'll go through. There could be some moments that we're missing. And because we might miss those moments, maybe we don't fully understand how the whole employee feels. Maybe it's not quite so easy to problem solve because we don't have all the perspectives as fast as someone feels that certain way. And, you know, worst case scenario, and hopefully no one is in this position, but worst case scenario, we could have such a disengaged workforce that they feel that there's a disconnection between you know, people who are there to create the employee experience or deploy technologies or actually address problems that come up. And the worst case scenario is employees check out. And if they check out, productivity declines, retention might be hurt. And of course, you know, it's hard to hide what might happen to customers. What do you think, Melissa?
I completely agree. And when you mention customers, I'm sure we've all experienced it when you're in a store or a restaurant or, you know, talking with someone in a call center and they begin to complain about internal technology or internal policy to you as the customer because they are so frustrated. And we really want to provide these employees with an outlet to provide this feedback so we can understand where is it difficult for employees to get things done for themselves and for their customers, because the last thing we want is an employee to spend time complaining with a customer about the company.
Well, and that's where, you know, as we think about what could best in class employee experience be as part of that continuous listening and engagement philosophy, and how do we incorporate this new way of working, this new digitally, you know, supportive way of working, this new fast way of working. And that's where, you know, as you see some of the things that we have on this slide, the biggest opportunity is to actually reach out in that moment, in that flow of work, and actually talk about and give someone an outlet, as you're saying, directly with the company to click a button, share how I feel, or if I complete a certain task or abandon a certain task, which is probably something that I want to do, and maybe it's core to my business function, there's something waiting for me if that moment happens and you trigger something that says, how do you feel right now? And that is something that can remove obstacles. It can make me feel supportive. It can make technology really do what it's meant to be, which is enable me to enable others. And it certainly makes me feel like the company is there for me.
This is what was so exciting for me, having moved from EX into CX, and I was launching myself these Medallia digital surveys for our customers to be able to provide us feedback at the moment they were transacting with us, or that we could pop up a survey when we could see by their behavior that they were abandoning or that they were taking a long time to complete a transaction. Saw incredible power to be able to do this for our employees too. If you can imagine an employee on a call with a customer and struggling to help the customer, to be able to just take a second to say, this is hard. This is making it difficult for me to serve our customers, and why. So powerful, and something that we didn't have and that I was excited to implement.
So Melissa, what do you think we should do next? Should we talk about what is the definition of digital, or maybe I should bring this to life for our audience?
Let's show them.
Okay, so this is the fun part of my job, where I actually can show you the technology in action and really share with you just how easy this could be. So let's all put our hats on and talk about from the perspective and pretend we are inside of your employee portal, your intranet, somewhere where you go to get communication, to get help, additional resources, updates from the company, and maybe even get to click across to all the wonderful systems you use to time keep or just run the business. So this typically is the lifeblood of an organization. We all have them at all of our organizations. And when you're here, right, you're going to see information. And now, what if you were to read this company newsletter and have positive feedback to share? I'm really happy that the company just made this change around opening the office plan. I really am supportive of what we're up to. Or what if the reverse? Social impact. I'm glad that we're talking about this, but I don't think we're supporting all of the causes we should be. And as an employee, I'd like to see our company do that. Wouldn't it be nice if you could see on the right-hand side of the screen, it was as easy for me to click a button, and then we guided the conversation of, oh, now you've clicked this button, what do you want to talk about? Let's talk on your terms, employee. I want to talk about something generally. Nothing's broken here. And I want to talk about how I feel about the company. And I feel generally great right now in this moment and in this flow. But do I think there's room for improvement on how I feel valued and how I feel about the company? Sure, there's always room for improvement and opportunity, and it's policy related. And I think we could support more causes, and I'd love to recommend a few. So in a couple of quick clicks, a couple of key questions, you now have a pulse in that flow of my day job, day to day, on how I feel right then and there.
And this is what I found so powerful, right? So in the past, when I was running annual engagement surveys and quarterly pulses, we'd ask employees, let's say it happens to be in October, but their great idea about changing something happened in August, right? Or when they happen to be thinking about something, when they're working with a customer, that's when the idea is, that's when they're excited, that's when they're passionate, but we don't have to be asking at that time. So that's why we call this the employee view. The idea that employees, when they are passionate about something, when they have the idea, when they meet with friction, when they're trying to serve a customer, they can click a button, tell us, and now we can collect this across all employees and quickly understand whether it's systems or policies or how they feel or what's happening in the environment or confusion, anything. We get it from them on their terms. And then we use text analytics to understand it.
And it's not disruptive, right? It was there as a service to me, as a way to speak to the company, but I didn't have to engage with it if I didn't feel like it at the time. It's no punishment for me to engage. I didn't even need to share my name and associate my name with the idea if I didn't want to. And we'll get into, of course, there's always options to allow your employees to do that, and also, capture that as employees do that so that you can follow up with them based on your discretion. But in this scenario, it's less about identifying exactly who this is, but maybe capturing the tens or hundreds of, maybe thousands of very similar recommendations for improvement or innovation or something around technology, and just start to get that pattern. And with that pattern, you can drive more change and you can drive it faster. So Melissa, maybe I'll show one more, right? So this is the click a button, choose your own adventure, employees get to speak their mind. But we all know out there, you all might have some things already in mind, things that are not easy, things that break, things that lead to phone calls if you're a people manager, or lead to phone calls if you're in IT, that we all wish we could get more information on. That's probably not by phone. Or, once a ticket is created, that's a really formal thing. What about an informal way to understand if something could be improved? So let's pretend I'm inside of a more sophisticated system now. I'm not on the internet anymore, and I'm completing a task. Okay, maybe I am accelerating something in Salesforce. I'm updating a record. I'm completing a task in there. So let's pretend I'm inside of that, and let's pretend I just completed that action. Now, when I completed that action, that doesn't necessarily mean that action was easy. It means I got to the finish line. It doesn't mean that I was able to get to the finish line that I was able to do everything I wanted, that I had all my questions answered, that I feel supported. So it's still a great time to check in. It's not disruptive at all because you've reached a natural conclusion point in the process. And this is where you can proactively reach out to the employee and say, we appreciate what you think. What do you think? And you can ask very relevant questions to the scenario that you're in. In this scenario, it's a little bit more technically related. So you can ask about ease of use. You can ask, were you able to really complete your task? And the answer could be in the gray, a little bit, but not fully. And maybe why? Maybe you had some broken functionality issues. Maybe you had error issues, what have you. These are obviously our starter questions. But think about how you could put this around technology breakpoints, around communication, potential gap points, potentially, inside of a system, both after they conclude the process, but what if they can't? What if they have to abandon whatever it is that you've set up for the employee? And having this proactively reach out and say, we know we could do a little better, tell us more, can really unlock a lot of information.
Right. And if I can offer an example here, we're working with an insurance company and we have employees within the insurance company servicing customers to process claims, right? So these things need to happen relatively quickly and it's very high volume. There's always a ton of work, right? So they're in the system processing the claim for the customer and there's something about it that's making it difficult for them. Sometimes we can't tell in the system because they go offline to look up a piece of information or they go offline to calculate something, right? Sometimes they're even looking up things on their phone to get what they need to enter it in and complete the transaction for the customer. But we don't know that without being able to ask them. And so we could use these kinds of surveys to say, wow, every time a claims rep is on this particular part of a claim, they're sitting there longer than we would expect. We can ask them what's going on and they can tell us they're going to go look up something off the site. And if we had provided it right there, it could have been so much faster. And you have this employee who's managing potentially an upset customer who's just had an accident or a fire, whatever it might be, right? And trying to complete a transaction and now they're going out of the system to do something extra. What an opportunity to improve both the employee and the customer experience. But we don't know this if we don't ask.
And that's where this is one of those scenarios where it just kind of dawned on us. And I think that was the eureka moment you and I both had. Essentially, what do we have to lose in terms of reaching out to employees? We only have insights to gain in terms of making their experience better. And the only caveat to all of that, right, is that I'm sure employees have some expectation that we'll act on the information and let them know that we're acting on the information. But the flip side of that is, well, isn't that what we're all here to do anyway? We're already doing that, but maybe we don't have the whole picture of what they really want to tell us. And so it's really just enhancing what you're already doing with the ability, with more information and to be able to do it faster.
Michael, that is just such a great point, right? We hear sometimes people saying, well, if I do hear about it, I'll have to take action, as you just said. But they're already taking actions. They're already trying to do something, but they don't have the employee input at scale. They might have anecdotal information or they might have some system information, but now we can get the information across a number of employees so we can figure out prioritization, right? We can figure out level of impact. Is this impacting employees with high volume work, employees that are particularly costly for the company, employees that have a significant opportunity cost that they're spending time dealing with administration when they could be selling. So many opportunities here, but you're exactly right. We're already doing this, but we're doing it without good data.
So hopefully everyone is excited out there, right? And I think we wanted to break it down even further on types of technologies, types of channels, types of examples, and share even more with you so that you feel that you out there can apply it in your organization. So I think we wanted to start it, first meets first. What does digital really mean? What a wonderful buzzword, as well as digital transformation, right? So, really just cutting through the noise. What does this really mean? We would define digital as a channel for operations and engagement. And from the perspective of this audience, the channel of operations and engagement is between the company and its employees. So if that makes sense, what are some examples of this? Well, we went over the intranet example together, where you might get some information. You might click across to these other applications to actually do your job or manage your time or manage your benefits. You might be doing that in an HRM system like a Workday or a time recording tool. CRM, we talked about Salesforce. IT service management, ServiceNow, very popular solution to submit official tickets for help. But we actually have clients, and including Medallia ourselves, We also have the surveys live inside of ServiceNow before the ticket is submitted, because ServiceNow also provides you with frequently asked question information, with enablement guides, also that you don't have to submit a ticket unless you really are not able to solve something on your own. And isn't that what we all intrinsically want? We want to do things ourselves. We don't want to have to ask for help. It's kind of like the age-old asking for directions. If I'm driving for a car, I don't want to have to ask for directions. Thankfully, we have GPS to do that now. ServiceNow, you have enablement guides. But what if the guides are not helpful? You want to be able to know that. Collaboration solutions. I know we're using one right now to actually talk with each other, but your employees use maybe Slack or another instant messaging protocol. Could they click a button or type feedback to you, type a command to start that dialogue? Learning management systems, where you hope to train employees so that they feel confident day to day. How does the training content? Is it helpful? And of course, we could talk about so much more here, and we should not forget companies' own websites. Even as an employee of Medallia, I like to keep up with what we're releasing out there, and I'm sure all of you look at your company updates, and perhaps that's also where you manage and create the kind of candidate experience of adding more employees to the portfolio. Melissa, what would you add in terms of the technologies you've heard out there, or what questions do you have of me about these?
Well, one of the things I love about this that you've pointed out, Michael, is that these are systems that employees use on a regular basis in the flow of their work. So we're not talking about creating something separate where for an employee to provide feedback, they have to go someplace else, right? Michael's described these things that they're already using every day. So I'm doing some sort of work and I have an idea and I can provide feedback. And that feedback could be technology feedback, process feedback. It could be about my experience of being an employee here. This can be any way we want to easily be in front of the employee and get feedback and ideas from them in the flow of work. Michael, I'd love to hear from you an example. Maybe you want to do it on the next slide, or maybe you want to tell us a story here of a customer.
I'm happy to. So, and actually we can share Bank of America as one of the customers that, follows this kinds of philosophy. And Bank of America has 200,000 plus employees that use what they internally refer to as their academy, which is their internal portal where employees can go for communication, enablement, and updates. And as you can imagine, that is an awful lot of employees. If 200,000 employees were to submit tickets all of the time when they can't find the information or do their job, I think maybe the company would come to a standstill. Luckily, that's not what happens, because they have very diligent teams that create the right kinds of training, and they create that kind of open dialogue outlet. So we are live inside of their portal in several different ways to actually enter it in these pages. And a lot of the questions that Bank of America asks, as you would expect, would be around content clarity, content relevancy, and content utility. Essentially, are we helping you? And if not, tell us what we can do to help you more. And I think that's just a very natural conversation to have with employees, but it's still quite impactful, even though it's very straightforward.
Yeah, I think this is really the opportunity here. And I love the Bank of America example. It's been so powerful for them. And some of you may know that the Academy actually received the first J.D. Power Award for employee experience. So incredibly successful. Well done for Bank of America.
So if we continue, and there's many more examples I know we intend to share and talk about. So if we feel comfortable with the technologies that we could be in, right? These are digital channels now. So now in the digital channel, we shared the Bank of America Academy example that was maybe more communications oriented, and a little bit of operations. But you can imagine being in these channels, like we said, there could be collaboration reasons for using this. You could be looking for technical support. You could be looking to self-train. You could be looking to ideate. Melissa, I know we have several examples of organizations out there capturing ideas on the fly. Even during COVID, I know that we have very specific examples about actually workplace policies, as well as even helping to find solutions for the pandemic itself.
Exactly.
So now, if you think about that, what are the potential things that might be happening in these areas? As we talked about, maybe something is not accessible. Maybe something is not clear. Maybe it's not fast. Maybe it's not helpful. Maybe your employees have been submitting ideas, but it's not in a systematic way. And even if it is in a systematic way, maybe it's not in a very immediate fashion. And maybe we're not fully, acknowledging them. So what if we could just capture that in another way so that we can be faster, and so forth and so on. So we have these technologies, we have the ability to engage in the flow, and these are some of the reasons why you might be doing that in those channels, because there is room for improvement.
I love these examples that you've given, Michael. And I think we all can probably think about our own work and employees that we work with that encounter things like this. And if you had one that you encountered that wasn't as fast as it needed to be, or as timely or as helpful, but we know it's not just one, it's in so many places. And these accumulate over time to create disengagement, disillusionment, frustration, and inability to have an impact on the organization that they wanted to. The reason they came here to work every day was to deliver for their customers, and they're spending so much time on different types of systems and processes that aren't helpful or confusing or not easy.
So what should happen if we are engaging in the flow and in these technologies and potentially addressing some of these potential opportunities? So now that is where, as Melissa talked about, we unlock the employee view earlier, right? So we not only are continuing to get the company perspective of the annual engagement, it's very deep and it is very actionable, but the employee view is just as actionable, if not even more actionable, faster, potentially at scale, and it's very inclusive. Because imagine how many employees you may or may not be able to reach right now because we don't have their email information on file, or they're not typically included in those sorts of formal company view engagements. But it doesn't matter in terms of if they have an idea or a suggestion, that could be just as valid as someone who's been with the company for 20 years. More opinions could help you get to the best ideas for employees and customers. And so what we're really talking about is we feel that a digital program could really unlock that employee view.
Exactly. You think about these employees who are on the front line every day, whether they're in a warehouse, they're out in the field, they're in a restaurant, they're in a store, right? They're on the front lines, and they're the first to see what's happening, the impact of changes that we make, the impact of external changes on their customers and on our business, and to give them a quick and easy way to provide those ideas or feedback. That's what we're talking about. And the accumulation of the ability to improve these day-to-day things is what drives improved engagement scores, because employees can have that impact they came to work to do. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They want to help solve these problems and make it a better place.
And Melissa, we should be fair that it's not always a bad situation, right? So I know both you and I were presented with a scenario recently at a retailer who commonly likes to try more innovative design concepts at their locations, which certainly, what an important time to do that now, considering we've all changed our buying behaviors as consumers. But to an employee, you can imagine operational change of that nature, right? In the physical environment, it could be stressful, it could be concerning, but it could be fun. And so we actually were approached recently, right, in conversations about what could it be like to enable employees who are in person and on the go with the ability through their employee provided mobile application to easily open up a dialogue with the company of what is working and what is not operationally from this store design and innovation concept.
Yeah, it's been great what they're doing, because previously they were getting employee ideas for products, but it was hard for employees to do it. They were writing something up and submitting to their manager, Now it's in the palm of their hand. They have an idea, they've heard feedback from a customer, and they can just submit it. Now we can see what it looks like across all stores. Are multiple people saying this, or is this an isolated suggestion? Then we can really understand where should we be investing.
So if this gets you really excited, and I know, Melissa, we do have a lot more prepared, we can maybe walk through just one more example together of maybe actually applying it, and then maybe see if we want to share a little bit more of examples. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, so we walked through this one example before, and so far we've talked about communications and operations and technology. So again, this is a classic example of communication oriented. We talk through, we click the button, and we remember this from before. We could share the suggestion for improvement on the policy, around the content, and reach out to the HR team in a really informal manner. And that can lead to change because maybe multiple people have done that, or even if multiple people didn't, the idea was great. Maybe the HR team acts on just the sample size of one. Ideas could be fantastic, right? So if that's the flow, what are some things that if you were getting this information on your side, what could it look like? So here's an example of what it could look like, for example, in Medallia. And you can ask and see, if you are on the HR team, different favorability of key questions you may have asked across all of these digital survey engagements. Whether it was the general engagement around communication, whether it was around operational changes. You can envision a special button in certain places, or a special survey that pops up on the screen in moments that you decide are the right moments to do that. And so using this, for example, what are my scores overall and over time? And what are my scores amongst my key employee segments? This, for example, could give you an idea of what to prioritize investigating to move the needle on how employees feel about the company, and which employees need you to move the needle the most. And then what to do and why could potentially be in a view like this. Melissa mentioned it earlier. Text analytics not only saves you time in terms of how much questions you need to ask, it makes it really easy, but it also saves you time in being able to find the idea or find the suggestion, find the improvement, and actually prioritize it from an impact standpoint as well. So this is actually prioritized based on topics we were looking for, as well as topics that were added over time. And you can see, just from this view, for example, coworkers are looking really like their collaboration, but from an environment standpoint, maybe meaningfulness standpoint, and a little bit of learning, these are some things that are negatively impacting their experience and how they feel about the company right now. So you can dig into certain populations of your employees and diagnose from there what can move the needle.
Right. This is such a great example, Michael. And I was just talking with one of our retail clients recently, and we were looking at what things were coming up in employee responses, and the word fun, F-U-N, was coming up. And part of the culture of working for this retailer was it's a fun place to work. But when we looked into what employees were saying, they're saying it's no longer fun to work here. So things had changed and become so stressful with everything happening with COVID. But we weren't asking a question about fun, and we hadn't preset our text analytics for it, but employees were raising it, and we realized that part of what was important about the culture was eroding. And that's really the power of the employee view. They bring up things we didn't know they were going to bring up.
And, we did share the Bank of America story earlier, which is fantastic. But what I want to do is just also share, one more story if I can. I'm going to advance past a few slides. But we also could think about this again from maybe less of an HR team perspective, but more of an internal shared service perspective, an IT perspective. So these are also rock stars in your organizations, and they have to stand up the house so that we have what we need to be able to actually make these systems work. So it's less about content and policy, and maybe a little bit more about functionality. And so much of what we do day to day now is dependent on technology. And so this is another example client of ours, and they actually combine the approach of course, continuing their formal ticket and ticket response, as well as follow-up after these tickets are completed. But they actually added onto this process the ability to give feedback before submitting a ticket. So imagine being able to combine the before tickets are submitted, which could be a larger population of employees. Some of them actually continue that process, still submit a ticket because they've met a roadblock they can't get past. But now you actually have more information to solve the experience for that individual employee, because they can share in the flow of work how they felt, what they experienced, and then when they submit the ticket, they can actually share that with the person who's directly responding, and with even more added detail, perhaps pictorial detail, perhaps some analytics detail, more than they could have probably shared before. And there is a population that might never submit a ticket. So from the CIO company perspective, you now have more of an idea and how widespread could an issue be, because there is a population that feels uncomfortable submitting the ticket. But it gives you all the information when they do submit the ticket to close the loop, and it also means you can increase employee productivity at an even larger scale, and so you can see that was one of the results that Equinix realized.
Yeah, such a great example. And there's so many examples. Michael's been involved with so many different customers and so many different ways that they can launch digital, right? And so here's just a few examples. You know, if you want to pick out any you want to speak to, Michael, and I'll pick one.
So I will go with the most radical concept today that maybe you may not launch today, but maybe in a year or 2 years from now, you'd say, this is the right thing for us. These digital technologies, what we do in these digital channels, it may seem very transactional, but Melissa mentioned it before. All of these accumulate into how I feel about the company. And while you can find me by email, and I of course will always give my company time by email, what if you were to find me where I actually am all of the time, which is in technology? And instead of doing the annual or quarterly or monthly engagement solely by email, which also might not reach all of your employees, you also offer that same engagement in the digital channel itself. That could dramatically increase the responses and response volume that you could expect from that. It's going to increase the timeliness and the actionability of the information, is the hypothesis, because you are there in the flow. And so it's going to be very topical how you feel right now in that moment. And it's certainly a way, again, to augment your program and help employees know technology is not just a cold, functional place where we click some buttons and do our jobs. It's also a way that your company cares about you, and you can engage with them in a personal manner, personal, but private and anonymous if you prefer, inside of that channel.
I love that example, Michael, doing that engagement survey in a digital channel. And when you think about the jobs at companies, there's at least one digital channel that an employee touches, right? It's easier when you think about office workers, but when you think about workers out in the field, they probably have a scheduling tool, or a place they go for payroll, or a place they go to clock in, clock out. Or if they're on a sales floor, the point of sale system, or an inventory system, or maybe they have a handheld device to track something for customers, right? There's so many different places that different jobs interact in some way digitally. And of course, there's a lot of employee apps out there that employees use on their phone to be able to get all the resources they need for work. Another great place to put the employee survey. And one last thing I'll mention, then I'd love to hear Michael's final thoughts, is having been in EX and CX and launching CX surveys. The thing that was most disappointing to me was finding employees providing feedback in the customer digital survey, because there was no other place for them to provide their feedback. So we gave it to our customers, but not our employees.
I haven't even heard that one, Melissa, but I am not surprised, because employees are asked to wear the hat of the employee, but also see themselves from their customer perspective. And they want to sometimes share the voice of the customer for employee as well as they want to share their voice as an employee. So making sure that whether it's from the customer perspective or their own personal one as an employee, they have to have a place to go that is safe and will be, even if not directly responded back to, just acknowledged automatically, acknowledged on a company call, acknowledged on an internal portal. That makes you feel valued as an employee. And it's a bonus if it's not only acknowledged and acted upon, but we all know that that's not always possible. But just meeting us where we are and letting us know, as an employee, you care as much about us as you do our customers. That I think can really ignite that love, spark that love of companies, which I know is, that is a hard thing to spark, but it's there. And I think engaging with employees like this is one way to reignite or even grow that relationship with the company.
Yeah, I love that, Michael. An excellent use of technology to really connect and engage with our employees.
Hey, you two, thank you. And I am really taken aback by a few things. Let me just call it out. The language that you use, number one, and the way you make it very understandable, because digital transformation, HR transformation, employee experience, design thinking, all this stuff can get esoteric and convoluted real quick. And many have kind of been deer in the headlights. So you made it very, very simple and palatable. So, kudos to you on defining digital and making it very understanding. One of the things that I just want to highlight in our time together before we wrap is the reality of COVID and the return to workplace. So, that many women exited the workforce during the pandemic. There is research that's out there that indicates that many people are willing and in fact will likely leave their current employer as we go back to workplace. That it relates to workplace policies, that relates to how they were treated during the pandemic, and so forth. So the need to truly understand on an ongoing basis, and I'm going to call this out because you touched on it, is that the flow of work, how somebody replies in one moment, 1 month, might be different than how they would, reply a week later. So experience is ongoing, in other words. So the frequency of data collection matters. So what I would like to just hear your thoughts on, Michael, start with you, is that given that we are coming back to some sense of normal, I don't like that. I don't think anyone does like that term, but there's something that's lacking there. We are going back to the workplace. There are return to work policies. Do you think those organizations who do not have an employee, actually, I love this, continuous understanding platform. I know we were talking about continuous listening, but continuous understanding platform. Do you think they're incurring too much risk? And I know you're not only, drinking the Kool-Aid, you're making the Kool-Aid, but, what are some of the risks of not having this type of process, this type of listening platform in place? I
do think it's too much risk. It's a risk that it doesn't quite make sense to me. You have everything, you have nothing to lose by asking and opening that dialogue, but you have everything to lose by not.
Yeah.
And that worries me a lot because, like you said, things are changing quickly. As much as they change for consumers, they're changing for employees just as fast, if not faster, because we have to keep up. And often the times we're actually behind the 8 ball in terms of adapting to customers' needs. So we then want to be able to adapt these listening and understanding programs to understand what employees need now and tomorrow and yesterday. And it just has to be open. Otherwise, if we wait too long, we won't have the resources or the technology or the coaching, the scenario handling available to them that they critically need. And if that happens too often for them in that scenario, why do you stay? You don't feel supported, and you make that feel personal. But I'm curious, Melissa, what do you feel?
I agree with you, Michael. Employees want voice, and if they don't get it from the company, right, they'll go to social media.
Yeah.
So what a great opportunity to let them tell you and respond to it rather than hearing about it in social media in front of everyone.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And if I am leading digital transformation or employee experience or culture or something like that, I am stepping back and I'm like, okay, how do I get this done? Do I enlist a third-party consultant? Do I hire somebody? Even if I hire somebody or a couple people, they can stand up a process, but they're going to need a tool to enable this continuous understanding. I'm going to start using that, on an ongoing basis. So, Melissa, I'll start with you. The how, how to, okay, we can, secure Medallia and like turn this on, but there's still things that have to happen. And so, what's your broad level coaching or suggestion on how to not only get started, but to, make this happen and make it a way of doing things and formulating talent strategy on an ongoing basis?
So for me, it's always starting with a business problem, right? Mm-hmm. What are we trying to address? A common one would be making things more simple for our employees so that it can be more simple for our customers, right? We see that a lot in financial service companies. A great place to start. This is a great solution to get the information we need to make things more simple for our employees and our customers. And then we'll build a champion in the business leader that we're supporting with this implementation. And the technology part's easy. I mean, putting in a digital survey is very simple. I mean, it literally took my IT team, when I implemented it as a customer, 15 minutes to put in the single line of code that we needed, right?
That's a good implementation time.
Right.
We spent a lot more time arguing about the survey.
That's right. So that's the easy to deploy, but certainly want to have the right conversation about where to deploy, and it goes back to the business problem. What is the business problem, which then influences the questions that you ask, where you put the engagement, and then also with that information, what would be the hypothesis of the insights that you might get, and who should see that, and what would you do with that information? At Medallia, we always like to talk about this as a solution design. The problem. What would you do with it? Who sees it? And, one of the things to think about is, widening the circle of your colleagues who could help you solve whatever challenge it is that you're facing. And there's lots of ways to solve it. Content, technology, operational change. We're hearing all different angles. What is constant is that digital engagement is at the center of all of it.
Yeah, Michael, we're just getting to know each other, but I could hug you for saying that, because what I have seen is this sit within HR, sit within a small group of, people are trying to push this big rock up a hill. And if we get more people, more stakeholders behind it, the probability that it actually delivers the desired return, it goes up. But a lot of people just, don't want to be bothered, or they think it's kind of the next fad thing. And I think we'd all agree that it's not a fad. This is going to be an integral way of doing business. And it's just, who's going to take advantage of this earlier rather than later. Because as we both all agreed that, the opportunity cost of doing this is just too high, so.
And Al, if I could just share, we've seen the same trends from a customer experience engagement standpoint. Digital teams have had years of data, and they've always, honestly felt that they have the data that they need, and they feel that they can drive change, and they're okay. But look at what's happened, right? They need help to drive change. So it's not to say, if I were to just, speak to HR directly, we know where you are and we know how you feel. You have a lot of information. What we think there's an opportunity for is to give you a little bit more. And then imagine it's so easy to share in aggregate, right? Very safe in aggregate. We don't know everyone's name. What is kind of happening from a pattern standpoint with your colleagues, also maybe executive level or managerial level, around cross-functional organizations? Wouldn't it be easier those insights, those recommendations you have, to actually be realized, if they could see that with you the same way that you do, and you can also show it to them faster than ever before, you'll be the rock star.
You're right. I know we have to wrap now, but again, very impressed. Thank you for sharing. And I'll just say this, and it takes off your last comment there, Michael. But it was a theme that was embedded in everything that you said. I'm spending a lot of my time, and I have actually over the course of the last 10 plus years, is really advocating for what I call appropriate data. There's been so much work around, okay, we have all these technologies, all this data within this technology, let's put it together and analyze it, and hopefully it's going to match the questions that leaders want or need to know. Oftentimes it has not matched. And so we have to be very creative in terms of the appropriate data to answer the appropriate question that leaders, want or need to know, the business problem that Melissa, talked about. So, kudos to you all again for addressing that, real fundamental need. As we wrap, Michael, any closing comments, and how can people learn more about you and what you do?
Well, I just want to thank you, Al, and I want to thank everyone for listening. Happy to chat with anyone on LinkedIn. And, as Melissa said, this is something that's easy to deploy. We are here to help you through whatever scenario you are. Melissa and I love to engage like that. And we, of course, are happy to show you what it could look like in your own system so that it's easy for you to see and easy for you to help convince your stakeholders out there that this is a great thing to try.
All right. Well, cool. Melissa, closing comments?
Yeah. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to help you.
Well, thank you again. Thanks for sharing. And hope to see you two in person before too long. All right. Be well.
That's great. Thank you, Al.
Thank you. Bye.